Hi friends, it's Sean, WB6JWB, with an update on the rebuilding of my old UHF repeater / remote base. Not too many hams these days know what a remote base is, so I usually just say repeater. I'm to the stage of modifying a 2-meter radio for remote base use. In this case a Kenwood TM-271A. It connects up to the what will be the new controller, an Arcom controller. I think one of the finest repeater controllers around with so many features, especially considering the relatively low cost. I had used previously from long ago this Lincom called an RLC1 Plus, which I have removed. Provided quite faithful service for many years. Was sort of leading edge on things like voice feedback and other many high-tech features back in the day. But for now, it's all about the Arcom. Many new features. This is the third Arcom controller I have. They work great. Highly recommend them. And so I built this breakout box for the Arcom controller because it has so many features. It has many analog inputs, control outputs, alarm controls, etc., etc. So for example, if I wanted to measure temperature, voltage, etc., I'm still working on this rat's nest of wires. This is a work in progress. You can see that data control cable that controls the frequency, remotely controls it from the TM-271A, is fed into the breakout box, and it goes to the data input of the Arcom controller, which I don't know if you can see, this is hardwired back into the controller. And so for example, I remotely turn various radios on and off using the controller, using this breakout box. And it also serves as the sort of the master power for all features of the repeater. I previously repaired the receiver back in here. I'm using the old Hamtronics box. I bought some years ago this old repeater and installed the Hamtronics latest transmitter and receiver pair, which you can't see because they're inside the chassis here, but you get the idea. Otherwise, there's really the only thing about the Hamtronics label here is, in fact, it does have a UHF and rather UHF transmitter and receiver inside the chassis. And then we've got the old duplexer needs some cleaning up and some work. And what I'm getting ready to do now is modify this TM-271A because this one that I had on the shelf has a bad front end. That's why I bought it, and it was too late by the time I discovered it to do anything about it. They are quite notorious for having super high receive sensitivity. However, their front end isn't too well protected, and so if there's a little electrical storm nearby, it'll sometimes wipe out the front end and make the receiver numb. So that's my next step. I'm going to pop this sucker open and add that cable to it so it'll plug into the controller as this one does. Okay, so today we're going to modify this TM-271A to attach it to an Arcom controller. And so thankfully popping the cover on these little Kenwoods is quite easy. You just grab the plastic from either side, the part pops off, revealing the inner cover, which hopefully should come off quite easily. Okay, now that we've finagled the top off, there's another seal on the bottom side you want to be careful with, and I'm going to leave the screws in place, so I will put that to one side. And here at the end of my screwdriver, you can see these different pads here, and they're labeled clearly, thankfully, on the circuit board. And that's where we're going to solder our DB9 connections to. But those pads again are right here. So I'm going to take out my old trusty soldering iron and correlate the correct wires with the pads inside the radio and make those solder connections. Okay, so there we are. May not be the prettiest job, but I've made the connections on the back end of the DB9 cable. The cable fits nicely through just a little space provided above the existing jack on the chassis. And then I put a little zip tie around the cable to make a strain relief. Okay, well I plugged in the modified Kenwood 2-meter radio to the controller on a temporary basis, obviously. And now we're going to test out to see if I have the wiring correct. If so, you should see the display change frequency on the 2-meter radio. So here we go.
140. 146.460S.
Well, there we go. Seems to be some local noise here in the shack. I don't have an antenna plugged into the 2-meter radio. Just want to make sure that the frequency changes when I command it to do so, and that seems to be the case. Okay, so I'm back in the shop again, and now what we're going to do is break back into the TM-271A for the purpose of connecting to it, which will allow the remote control of the memory scan function. So for example, from the front of the radio, if I'm in the memory mode, I would push this button for 1 second and it starts scanning. And then it takes about 1/10 of a second to push that button to stop it scanning. Now if the radio's in the VFO mode, which we'll push here, the VFO mode, it takes about, again, 1/10 of a second. If you push the memory recall button, it's back in the memory mode. And again, push it for about a full second. It'll start scanning until it's pushed for 1/10 of a second again. So what I'm going to do is make connections inside the radio after opening it up and connect it up to my Arcom controller and program the controller to perform those functions which I just demonstrated. Okay, now that the modification is done for the memory scan on the radio, I'll do a quick demo while the radio is still on the bench. So as you can see right now, it's locked on 145.18. I think it's in the memory mode, but we'll start it scanning.
Monitor start.
So it's scanning away. Obviously 2-meter band kind of quiet around here this afternoon. But if I wanted to stop the scan, I would command it to do so.
Monitor stop.
And if I want to dial in a specific frequency in the usual way, I can still do that. And so that puts it back in the VFO mode as is expected. But still, even now that it's in the VFO mode, I can still command it to go back to the memory mode and memory scan, which I'll do now again.
Monitor start. Monitor stop.
So that's it. Quick demo of the memory scan function modification. Okay, so I've got the equipment mounted up in the new homebrewed rack. Obviously this is the back of the rack. So far so good. Up the top is the RC210 repeater controller. Just below that is my obviously homebrewed breakout box. I've got the switchable 12 volt DC outlets, master DC input. See the data cable going out to the 2-meter radio. There's a temperature sensor in there. The lines that go to the 2-meter radio to stop and start the scan function, so on and so forth. The next rack down is the 440 transmitter and receiver. We got a great big empty slot there. There's the TM-271A happily scanning. This is a great product made by I think it's OCI out of Canada. It's a 2-meter bandpass filter to deal with the hostile 2-meter commercial environment. And then lastly below that is the duplexer, Motorola, I think it's 1500 or 1504 duplexer. So that's where it's at now in testing. And then we're going to convert a 55-gallon drum to securely hold that rack. So now I've moved the radio rack to the inside of its enclosure, the barrel, for final testing. It's a snug fit, as expected, and so we've got the antenna connections on the exterior now and the power coming out. Pretty snug inside. Everything fits just right. You can see over here on the front how the duplexer knobs just about an inch away from the interior of the barrel. The strap is for inserting and removing the rack out of the barrel. Of course, it'll be in a vault on the hilltop. That's about it. A little bit of progress and some testing, and the next we'll move to the mountaintop. Well, after a very slow 3-hour drive, we finally made it to the hilltop. Getting ready to install the new equipment and see how it goes. Okay, well, I've knocked out the old battery shelf, installed the new battery shelf, because it's a very tight fit in the old vault, and I'm getting ready to drop the barrel in and see if it fits okay. Well, I did one final check of the plugs, connectors, and wiring. I'm ready to drop that thing in the vault and see what happens. Alright, everything's locked and loaded. I'm going to reach down here, throw the master switch, and see what happens.
RC210 repeater controller V6.04511 ready.
There we go. Well, that's all there is. Time to close the latch and head down the bumpy road and head home.